Behind me is a footprint of a twin tower, and this is my neighborhood. I feel incredibly lucky to live here. It's resilient, it's beautiful. When you live down here and you work down here, you end up spending a lot of time thinking about what happened here on September 11th.
New York City is in shock, and America is under siege.
And now that it's been 1 year since the Taliban took control of Afghanistan, people around the world are thinking about it too. With fresh signs and reports that the Taliban is once again giving al-Qaeda safe haven in Afghanistan, I went into the office to talk to my colleague, a former State Department official, a former CIA officer, and a terrorism analyst to talk about whether we're seeing a resurgence of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and what it would mean for the world. These experts say that to understand what's happening now, you have to understand the Taliban's long history with al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization behind attacks that have killed thousands of people around the world. When Osama bin Laden and his associates were looking for a home for al-Qaeda in the 90s, they found refuge in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan.
As a result, al-Qaeda leaders, bin Laden and al-zawahiri after him, pledged loyalty, bayat is what they called it, to the emir of the Taliban.
Afghanistan became a base from which the group could communicate, organize, train, and plot. After bin Laden masterminded the September 11th attacks in 2001, the Taliban refused to give him up. It was a decision that brought the organizations even closer together when the US launched its invasion to root out both.
That relationship, it is a bond that has been forged in fire. It is often a bond of blood.
During the insurgency, members of al-Qaeda and the Taliban often intermarried, and analysts and officials say al-Qaeda gave the Taliban vital support, teaching fighters how to use truck bombs, suicide vests, and roadside explosives against the West. The 20-year conflict, America's longest war, began to wind down after the Trump administration struck a deal to withdraw troops in exchange for Taliban promises on terrorism.
Very importantly, the U.S.-Taliban agreement entails a promise from the Taliban that terrorists can never again operate from Afghan soil.
But the Taliban didn't say anything about breaking with al-Qaeda.
It said nothing about them actually cutting ties.
The deal was so vaguely worded because the US was in such a rush to get it done, and the Taliban had the upper hand because they knew the US was in a rush.
A year later, the Taliban capitalized on a chaotic withdrawal by the Biden administration, sweeping across the country to seize provincial capitals and ultimately Kabul in a matter of days.
We begin with Afghanistan and the dramatic fall of the capital.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy compound.
We're being just surrounded by dozens and dozens of people who are desperate to leave.
And according to the United Nations, al-Qaeda aided and advised the Taliban as it did that. And when the Taliban formed a new government, al-Qaeda allies were appointed to senior roles. The UN also says that al-Qaeda is enjoying greater freedom under the new regime. And earlier this year, officials say Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda himself, moved to the heart of Afghanistan's capital, where he was ultimately taken out by a US drone strike.
I authorized a precision strike that would remove him from the battlefield once and for all.
US officials say he was living in a safe house next door to a home owned by a Taliban official. But not just any Taliban official. The powerful Minister of Interior, who happens to be a longtime al-Qaeda ally.
The fact that a safe house associated with this movement and this man was being used by the leader of al-Qaeda is highly significant. It's not an accident. This sort of protection only happens if al-Qaeda is getting buy-in for that from the highest levels of the Taliban government.
While it's not clear if Zawahiri himself was plotting attacks, he served as a figurehead to unite al-Qaeda affiliates worldwide. And in recent months, he was filming videos to thousands of al-Qaeda supporters. In a statement, the Taliban said there is no threat to any country, including America, from the soil of Afghanistan. It vowed to investigate the drone strike. Experts say that freedom to communicate and operate is crucial for terrorist groups.
Terrorist groups thrive in safe havens like al-Qaeda did in Afghanistan before 9/11. It gives them the space to operate freely. It gives them a sanctuary to plan attacks, to raise money, to train operatives, to move fighters in and out to war zones or other target zones.
So given that, Is it fair to assume that a sanctuary anywhere makes these organizations stronger everywhere?
Certainly in the sense that they do interact, that these affiliates do try to support one another.
Over the years, al-Qaeda has found support in places like Syria, Yemen, West Africa, and Somalia, and that has allowed the organization to persist as a dangerous and decentralized network. Those places could potentially be used by al-Qaeda to try to launch attacks against the West, since a UN report suggests that the group is being careful not to embarrass the Taliban by launching attacks from Afghanistan.
This is the real danger of Afghanistan. It doesn't make the danger in Somalia or Mali or Yemen or Syria or, name your country where al-Qaeda has risen since 9/11. It doesn't diminish the threat there. I would argue it makes this threat all the greater. And it makes, and Afghanistan serves as a nexus to this threat.
The US isn't the only country that has been rocked by terrorism. To learn more about how terrorist activity in Africa has led some there to welcome Russian mercenaries, check out this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.